everyone. This is episode 2 of Veterans Voices with Joe and SteveO. We just want to thank everybody for the tremendous support that we received and for all your comments on Facebook and on YouTube. You guys are great, and we're glad you enjoyed our episode 1. If you continue to enjoy this, please go and subscribe to our YouTube channel, like us on Facebook, and then look for us on Anchor for our podcast, and we should be available here on all the podcast sites. I'm still working on that a little bit to make sure we're completely out there, but that's where we are right now.
Yeah, and yeah, we were really surprised and excited about how much response we got. So that means that what we're doing is working. So I wanted to call out a couple of people who have helped us in this, because all this doesn't just happen. It's not just us to show up, right? So but we needed help with some behind the scenes stuff like a logo. So that cool animation that was done is Ginny Newman. She's a tattoo artist out of Detroit, Michigan area. So we're gonna post some like a link to her so that you go check out her work. So if you have a business and you're out there and you're looking for similar type of graphic work done, or if you're in the area where she's at and you want a tattoo, she's like top notch. So we really want to thank her. And then we're also going to be uploading some music to go along with this. And so a friend of ours in Naples, Italy, Gennaro Percelli, who's like one of the top blues guitarists in Europe, I would say in the world, he's letting us use some of his material that we're going to include on here. So when you hear that, you're going to know that it's Gennaro Percelli, and again, we're gonna give him some love on our sites there, so that you can listen to his music and maybe it's something that you want to check out. So thanks, we appreciate all the support.
So episode 2, today's guest, we have retired Navy Commander Jim Ridgway coming to us. He's in California in the San Francisco Bay Area. He's going to talk today about some fascinating stuff. And his experience in both the Navy flying P-3s and then what he's doing outside the Navy afterwards. So today is episode 2, and we have Jim Ridgway coming to you today.
All right, so we'll just leave it to that, and I hope you enjoy the episode, and make sure that you follow Joe's instructions there and give us some love.
All right, take care, everybody. All right, hello, friends. We have Mr. Jim Ridgway with us today.
Hey.
Hey, Jim. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. How you guys doing?
Good. It's nice to have you. We appreciate you taking the time.
Absolutely. So I appreciate being invited. You know, Joe is a collector of people, I think. So it's a good thing to have him in my contact list. So I saw your first episode. It was pretty cool. And Joe said, "Hey, why don't you join us?" I said, "Well, why not?" So
we're excited that you could join us. I have been accused of being a connector of people. So I like to think of it that way. I like to bring people together, and then they can all be friends or not. I mean, it doesn't matter to me later.
Yeah.
So that's what we do. So Jim, tell us who you are and where you served and about being a veteran, whatever you want to say.
Sure. So I grew up in New Jersey, and I was a senior in college, and I was trying to figure out what I was going to do when I graduated, and I had some opportunities that I didn't really enjoy, and I said, well, I've always wanted to go in and fly. So I called the Air Force and the Navy on the same day. And the next day, the Navy recruiter had me in her office and applying and getting ready for AOCS. 3 weeks later, the Air Force recruiter called me. I said, "Dude, you're too late." And so I went to AOCS, just like the movie An Officer and Gentleman, only not really. And started flight school. I flew P-3 Orions for 15 years, just about straight. And then I went what they call, I went to be a CEO of a reserve center in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which was interesting. And then I moved to San Diego, where I met Joe, and he taught me all about those things that float around on the ocean, and that was a pretty good deal. So I did that for a little while, went to the War College, then I came up here to the Bay Area in San Francisco, and decided I was more than done. And so I decided to retire as a commander, just like Joe, after 23 years of service. My years were 91 to 2014. So.
Wow. So tell us what kind of assignments did you have location wise? I mean, you weren't just there.
Right. Yeah. So I started out in Pensacola at Aviation Officer Candidate School, and then I went to flight school in Milton, Florida. And from there, I went and learned how to fly multi-engine in Texas. Wound up in Jacksonville for the Fleet Replacement Squadron for the P3. My first fleet tour was Whidbey Island, Washington, VP-46. Did 3.5 years there. Did 2 years as a T2 Buckeye instructor in Meridian, Mississippi. I don't recommend Meridian. Sorry, anybody, but that was tough for me. And
hey, man, we can make fun of the Gulf Coast all we want. I spent time down in Kansas City, and
so,
you know, it's
so
like rough down there.
Yeah, no, but I went down to New Orleans after that. I picked up what they called TAR, now they call full-time support. So I was an active duty guy on the reserve side, and I did 3 years in New Orleans, 3 years in Brunswick, Maine at 2 different reserve P3 squadrons. And then I went off to Tulsa to be the CEO of the reserve center there for 2 years, 23 months actually. You don't want to spend too much time in Oklahoma either. And then,
and you came out to San Diego, and you had spent like a total of like 0 days on board a ship, right?
When I showed up to Desron 1, I had this much time on a ship. And I had 17 years in the Navy. And Joe taught me all about ships. We had 6 frigates, and he taught me terms like craptastic and craptacular. And he was a hard ass. I tell you what, he was the engineering guy for the destroyer squadron, and he took me under his wing and taught me all the hiding places where they would hide their dirty laundry, where they would have their sleeping areas, like behind the missile magazine. So every time we went to do a pre-insert inspection, I'd go knock on the comms room door, and they'd go, "Yes, sir, can I help you?" I said, "I want to come into space." And there's a hatch behind the comms room guy, and it always had like 1 or 2 bolts that were done up, and that was it. I said, "Hey, let's look in here." And that's how you got behind the missile magazine. And there were sleeping bags and pillows and whatever else they wanted to stash back there. So Joe showed me all those little secrets. And then we had a good time, I think.
So let me ask you, so 17 years flying in the Navy, finally get to go and get some sea legs. Were you a little nervous about that? Because I was in the Air Force. I had worked for the government for years. Joe hired me out in Guam to be a safety guy for MSC, and I had to immediately start going out to sea, mostly doing in-serve stuff, doing inspections and doing sea trials. But I was a little nervous at first because I kept thinking, I'm going to go on there, I'm going to be puking, I'm going to look like a moron. But I never got seasick ever. It was so easy.
Dude, I used to take airplanes and tumble them end over end for fun, so I wasn't worried about getting puked. But I tell you what, I did 3.5 months underway at Carrot 2008. I was the deputy commander. Never been to sea before in my life, and I'm the deputy commander for this big major 6-nation naval exercise. Joe got to stay home and take care of the ships for us, and it was a good time. The Commodore was a good dude, and we went out and lit it up every time we got into port, which was great. He was great at leaving it on the ship because he was pissed off at us just about every minute of every day otherwise. Sure. And we had a good time. It was fantastic. After that, I went to the War College for a year, and then I went up to Alameda, and I was the CEO of the Reserve Center up there. We had 650 reservists up there, and you go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, it's interesting that you were a P3 guy and you never made it to Hawaii to be assigned out of there. So when they moved P3s from Whidbey to K-Bay, that was a pretty big, pretty big opportunity for a lot of guys.
Yeah, so there was no reserve P3 squadrons in K-Bay, so I didn't go out there, and so I did all 3 CONUS coasts, and then I stopped flying. So after that, it was all leadership stuff. And I've really been able to leverage that when I get out. But I tell you what, I was up for my next promotion, and I thought about that. I called the detailer. I said, "Where are you going to send me?" He said, "I got DC and I got Norfolk." I said, "What else you got?" He goes, "I got Norfolk, I got DC." I said, "Okay." And I hung up the phone with him. I called my boss and said, "Hey, boss, I'm out."
Okay.
And 1 year later, I retired. And I was just done. I told people I was so done you could stick a fork all the way through me. So it was good stuff.
Well, that was kind of your situation too, right, Joe? I mean, you could have stayed. You probably would have gotten promoted, but it was just enough was enough.
No, that's doubtful. I doubt I would have gotten promoted. I was probably a terminal 05. I didn't stay around for the board to convene, but when I was at the end of my career, when I was out in Guam, I knew I was coming back to Hawaii to a job that was not a job that I was going to get promoted out of. It was a job that I was going to be good to retire from. And so I planned that coming back, landed back in Hawaii where I wanted to be, and then got out. And so, I mean, if people are out there and they're still active and they're thinking about, when they're going to leave, like you're all going to either, retire or separate or end your service at some point. It comes to an end at some point, and you should actively be thinking about, hey, this is where I want to be when I'm coming to the end of my career.
So I had asked very specifically for the Bay Area because I wanted to be here, and I'm still here, and it's 6 years later. And when I made the conscious decision, I'm getting out, I was all in to networking and reaching out to the community. I'd already done that because I had a really good position. I was the Navy for the Bay Area. Everything else is done. All that's left is recruiters and the reserve centers. And so we have San Francisco Fleet Week and all kinds of big high visibility items that happen here, but there's no fleet concentration here anymore. And so I was able to get in, meet all the guys. I had 4 different police departments recruiting me heavily. And my wife at the time says, "Do you really want to know what a tweaker smells like?" I said, "Well, probably not." But at the end of the day, I was able to build a really good network, and it really paid off up until very recently. The company I work for is in a little trouble, and they've eliminated my position, but the severance package is fantastic, and I'm pretty confident that something else is going to come along very soon. So anyway.
How is your COVID-19 pandemic quarantine going?
It's going fantastic. I'm living with my girlfriend in her lovely house. It's a beautiful day outside right now. I don't have any freaking work responsibilities except for finding a job, so that's been pretty good. And we're doing all right. The highlight of the week is going to the supermarket. And we run just about every morning a couple miles before everybody gets up and about. So we do all right there too.
That's cool. Do you wear a mask when you run? Yeah, because that doesn't make any sense, right?
Doesn't do shit. Yeah. Dude, we tried wearing masks yesterday for the first time. I was like, yeah, that's not good. Although, SteveO, I got to tell you a good story though. Hold on a second before Joe goes down this. So Joe, as I said, Joe really taught me about these ships and how they work and everything. And one of the things that he taught me is these power panels all over the ship. And there's a little button underneath the power panel. There's 3 lights. And when you push the button, you should see all 3 lights light up. And if one of the lights doesn't light up, that means one of the phases isn't checking properly, and there's a potential short somewhere. And so we were doing a pre-in-serve inspection on one of these frigates, and Joe says, "Hey, sir, come here. And he goes up to this power panel, and he pushes the button, and only 2 lights come on. And he says, "I told them about this last week." I said, "Okay, what's the worst thing that could happen?" And he said, "Well, somebody could die." I said, "Okay." So we go up to the bridge wing, and the safety officer on the ships is the operations officer. And I should set this up. I was very chill. I was a fairly new commander. I wasn't stressed about anything. And so I didn't really swear too much. I really was pretty easygoing. Joe can back me up on that. And
Yeah, the pilot. He was super
yeah.
easygoing. The aviators are always easygoing.
And I had the force protection officer next to me, and he was about 6'5", maybe 220 pounds, bald, scary looking, no 4. And I had Joe standing on the other side, and this little lieutenant comes running up. Sir, what's up? I said, Opso, what the fuck? I said, Lieutenant Commander Casale told you about this problem a week ago, and you haven't fixed it. I said, does somebody have to die before you fix that? And he said, no, sir. And he runs off. And the force protection officer looks over at me and goes, who the fuck are you? And I said, dude, you gotta know when to pull that out and use it, because it's a tool. If you lose your shit, then it doesn't help anybody. And so that was one of the things that I'll never forget working with Joe is that little pre-in-serve inspection. But it was a good time.
Was it a real a really dangerous situation, Joe, or were you just screwing with them?
It's a potentially dangerous situation. Absolutely. I mean, when I asked Joe, I said, "What's the worst thing that could happen?" He said, "Someone could die." I was like,
"Yeah." So
Joe doesn't bullshit.
Yeah, I mean, it's a short and an electrical panel, right? When it's grounded someplace, the electricity is not going where it's supposed to go. Like, I mean, is somebody going to go in there and get electrocuted? Probably not. But I mean, it can catch on fire. Somebody could get electrocuted.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
And I've chilled out about that stuff now. Now that doesn't bother me. If you want to set your ship on fire, as long as it's not on it, I don't care what you do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well,
so
it was kind of like that. I remember when I did my first internal audit on MSC ship, and I knew nothing because I'd never been on a ship before, and I remember I was supposed to be the expert safety manager for a float safety for MSC. I'm supposed to know the safety management system. I didn't know anything, and I remember we go John McCannanley, who was my MSC, teacher. He was a good guy. And then, and Joe had hooked me up with him. He was like, hey, if you're going to have anybody like evaluate your training, this is the guy you got to have, because the rest of them are a shit show, right? So you don't want any of those other guys. So John was good. And I remember the first time we went up to the master's stateroom, and, we were in briefing them, and we're just talking, and I'm just relaxed and, got my notes and stuff. And John's mostly doing the in-brief, and, the master's captain of the ship. He says, so Steve, so you're not going to talk? He goes, why are you here? And I go, well, I've never been on a ship before. This is my first time. And he goes, I really don't know what I'm doing. He goes, wow, well, we really got the A team here. I said, well, that's what you got John for. I'm just here to have coffee. And where is that? It's just kind of funny because by being like low key and just relaxed. And I think that they liked that, not that they could like roll over me because I didn't know anything, but they liked that I didn't come in with preconceived ideas already where I knew everything and I was just going to dick with them all the time. It really wasn't like that button, which I wouldn't have known anything about. But by the time I was done and doing the in-serves, I pretty much knew everything. I mean, it's funny after 2 years what you learn. But then I followed Joe, into retirement, or he followed me, and don't need any of that anymore. It's just kind of funny how you go to a new thing and how you have to adapt.
Oh yeah. So yeah, my last year in the Navy, I was totally and completely focused on what was next. And so, like you guys, I went to the DAV and handed over a copy of my medical record. Said, "Yeah, please evaluate this." And they submitted it for me. I only came out with a 10% rating. I've got a couple of items that are at 0, but I tell you what, that rating is so valuable. Even if you having a rating, even if it's 0%, it waives your VA funding fee for a home loan.
Right.
I mean, that's real money.
And, it's good stuff. I mean, there's so many different ways to take advantage of any sort of disability rating at all.
Yeah.
And, the different, I mean, now you have like shopping privileges. They're inviting veterans back into, the commissaries, guys that aren't retired, that kind of stuff. So it's a big help financially.
Actually, I want to grab something. I meant to have it here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hold on 1 second.
So what do you want to talk about, SteveO? You want to talk about the fact that the military seems to just throw people into any sort of job, and whether they know how to do it or not, and then
Well, well, you know what? That's actually, I think that's the reason why I was able to do like what you had hired me to do, was because at the end of the day, you know, in the military, you have a specialty and, you know, you're an expert in something, but you could easily divert and go into another job. You could be, you know,
Oh, yeah.
you could be a filling guy, and there's a big learning curve. And I think but that big learning curve is not like you would have on the outside, because there's an expectation, because you have so much experience in doing like everybody else's job, or at least understanding it. It's not that difficult to think that you would hire somebody who doesn't have, like, as long as you have the basic, you know, you have the skill set to do the job that you're doing, you can learn how to apply it to a different environment, right?
Yeah,
that's kind of the idea.
That's a superb point. And the hardest thing is getting the civilian employers to understand that. You got to find that person who's willing to take a chance on you because they believe in your service. Yeah. I want to show you this, the guys, that I just got this a little while ago. That is a lifetime pass to every national park in the country.
Oh, no kidding.
Any disabled veteran at any rating is eligible for this. You pay $10 processing fee. It takes about 3 months, and they send it to you.
That's great.
And
yeah, I didn't even know. I knew that we had access to national parks at no charge.
Yeah.
I didn't know that you could get a pass for that.
yeah, and so all you have to do is apply for it, and they charge you, and then they send that thing back. That thing arrived like a month and a half ago. I haven't used it yet, but I can't. You know, it's good for your whole life.
Yeah, our parks. So one, I have a rooster behind my screen right here. I might need to solve that problem. And then, are the national parks open right now, or are they closed?
Yeah, I think they're closed, or most of them are. I know. I'm pretty sure Yellowstone's closed, and what's the other huge one? I always forget.
The Grand Canyon is a big park. Yellowstone, Grand Canyon, Yosemite.
Yosemite's
Those are all the
closed.
big ones.
Yosemite's closed. I know that too.
So I always want to point something out before we go any further. You learn stuff when you watch Veterans Voices with Joe and SteveO, because you just learned, and we learned all about that pass that you can get. So if you don't watch this for any other reason,
Yeah,
that is a good tip for you.
there you go. So I thought I'd share that with you guys. I didn't know if you knew about that. And I found out about it through a VA newsletter.
Yeah, it really is tremendous, the amount of, I mean, people think about, like, when you get some disability, it's all about the money. And that's, you know, it's important to be able to have that. I mean, if you get 10%, it's probably not anything, you know, it's maybe a little bit of beer money, but beyond that, it's not, but that's not the point.
Was it that 10% of my retirement is tax-free.
Oh,
That's great. Yeah.
Are you going to go back for more?
This dude, sadly, there's nothing wrong with me other than up here. No.
I don't know that you have fully explored the scope of what is wrong with you up here, Jim. Because I know you, and so I can tell you that there's probably more disability than you realize.
Yeah.
You know, between here and here.
I was very, very fortunate. I have tinnitus, which is not severe, but it's definitely there. And that is the only serious thing that's wrong with me at this point, other than, you know, whatever's between my ears, or lack of whatever's.
We all have tinnitus, right? Everybody here has tinnitus.
Yeah. There's not a day goes by when I don't go, you know, is it really worth living with this sound that's in my ear? Because I'm pretty certain it's not. You know, and then I wake up from that, you know, from that pain and agony. And mine's probably hardly anything compared to what some, we have this discussion every time we talk, it seems like.
We always talk about tinnitus.
Oh, yeah.
Mine's new, so it's
Oh, yours is new.
I've had it for 8 months, and
oh, wow.
it's only in one ear, and It drives me crazy. I can change the sound, which makes me think it's not in my ear. And the doctors won't listen to me. They just go, you'll get used to it. Here's a hearing aid. Go play out in the street.
No, I noticed mine first when I was at Desron 1 with Joe. And it's been there ever since. And I'm certain that it's from, all the airplanes I flew in.
Oh, I'm sure of that.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Hey, so when we talked pre-interview, you had mentioned that you had some pretty interesting experiences, out there on the road. So, do you mind like sharing something with our listeners? Something that experience that you think stands out?
Well, yeah, I mean, other than working with Joe, I was over in the Middle East in the mid '90s when people were not shooting at each other, and the Omanis actually threatened to shoot us down one time. That was fun. But you know what? I have a really good story. I got a good story for you. So we were based on my first deployment in Masira, Oman, and we couldn't wash the airplanes in Masira because they didn't have the firefighting set up, and it takes a lot of water to wash the whole airplane and shoot water actually down the intakes of the engines to clean off the turbine blades and all kinds of stuff. So we would go to Fujairah, and this is the mid '90s, so the Iron Curtain had just fallen, and Aeroflot had quite a presence in Fujairah, and we would get there to watch the airplane, and all their airplanes are out on the grass, and we're like, well, what the hell's in the hangar? And we go look in the hangar, and it's full of TVs and microwaves and stereos and all this shit that they were loading on the airplanes to fly back into Russia. And their flight engineer would come over and talk to our flight engineers. Hey, I have this leak on the brake thing. Will you cap this for me so I can go fly? And the flight engineer's like, yeah, I ain't touching that, dude. But those guys, I tell you, were absolutely nuts. We would go into the little tiny Fujairah airport. And they had a little duty free, and they had a little sort of bar set up. And one day we're in there buying our snacks or whatever, and this pilot walks in, and he's got the Aeroflot uniform on, and he looks like death warmed over. And he walks up to this little bar kiosk, and he orders a beer, and he just pounds this beer. I mean, he chugged it faster than the guy with a funnel. And then he staggers out to the airplane. They start up and fly away. I was like, dude, that's just so wrong. So that was a little bit of excitement in my Middle East time. I came very close.
He wasn't flying. Maybe he was just riding, and he was just getting a drink, and all he had to do was sit in a jump seat.
Maybe.
Not the case?
I doubt it. I really doubt it. Oh, man. Yeah,
well, you know what? When I remember when I was active duty, when my first assignment was in Japan in the late '70s, and I was like an E3, but I worked in this skiff in this reconnaissance center, and all of the officers that worked in there were pilots who were flying a desk, for their couple of years, right? So,
yeah.
and these guys were all, this is just right after Vietnam, so a lot of these guys were like, were fighter pilots. And I knew this one guy who was a wild weasel. He was a nav on a wild weasel on an F4. And so he was pretty wound up pretty tight. And he drank a lot. He drank a real lot. And so he would always, when we'd have downtime, he would kind of take me under his wing, and he would like tell us all stories. And he would tell me that before every mission, they would get hammered. They would just get wiped out. And, but they were going every day, and they're, wild weasel is,
oh yeah,
down, and they're chasing radar sites, right? And getting missiles to get shot at them. And he's the navigator. So he's like the backseat guy. He gets to see it all coming in. And he was just like really, really a great guy, but he was really, really wait to explode. Like, he would have been great to have on the show because we could probably, first off, he has every disability that you could have. PTSD would certainly be up there. He'd probably be like 100% PTSD. But it's just funny how the culture is so different today than it was then, right? The whole idea of pilots doing that.
Oh, yeah.
And it was pretty common. I think during Vietnam.
Sure. I tell you what, I used to go to air shows when I was flying T2s, and I heard this one. I didn't witness this, but I heard this secondhand. So these guys are at the air show and they're getting ready to leave. It's Sunday afternoon, and there's an F4 Phantom at the hold short, and tower clears him for takeoff. He says, "Yeah, I need 30 seconds," and the tower says, "Yeah, just let us know." Canopy goes up, helmet comes off, pilot leans over the rail, heaves his guts out, goes back in, helmet goes back on, canopy comes down, he goes, "Okay, I'm ready to go." It's all good, you know. And the student in the back goes, "Sir, I want to fly those."
Those were cool airplanes. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
you know, we used to see them. I think the last time I ever saw one flying was at Clark Air Base, and they would have, you know, they'd be screaming over my house all the time when they'd have the Cope Thunder exercises, which were in the Philippines in those days. But that was a pretty cool airplane. It was, you know, just a big, a big engine with a seat on it. You know.
Oh, yeah.
Crazy.
That was good stuff. So yeah, we had some good times. I almost got sent to Iraq too. I think Joe might remember that. I don't know if you do.
Oh, did you almost get I-8 out of Desron 1 sent to Iraq? A lot of guys. I never got I-8. I was super stoked that I never got I-8.
Oh, yeah.
That's
why I went to CENTCOM. So I went to Carrot as the deputy commander. And when I came back, because I just barely dodged this IA to Iraq, I knew that they were going to tag me. And so I volunteered for Tampistan.
Tampastan's not bad.
I mean, that's where I live.
There you go.
You know, I go there all the time, and I watch people. I watch all of the bearded guys, big bearded fat guys who were once in the military and who are now got their GS-12 job.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely, man. I tell you what, I was there when Petraeus was there.
Oh, okay. Oh, well, that was. No, it's funny. I was talking to a buddy of mine who's he just retired. He's a Navy commander who just retired. Did his 22 years Navy SEAL, and we talked a lot about Petraeus because Petraeus was famous in this area because he was hanging out with those that husband and wife team that had all those parties that basically destroyed his life. I don't think, I mean, they may still be here, but they're probably like living under a bridge or something near the base. I'm not sure. Have no influence anymore, you know. So.
Yeah.
Oh man. Hey, so I'm getting the warning signal that we should wrap this up. So, any final thoughts from anyone?
You know, DAV is your friend. You guys have both said that. For guys who are looking to get out, do it. Networking is your friend. LinkedIn has a 5 years free LinkedIn Premium for active duty. Get it before you leave and keep it for 5 years. It's invaluable. All kinds of assets and programs out there. Take advantage.
Yeah, and you know what I would say, so I'd like to point out that, so you had mentioned, Jim, that you had you got, when you did what Joe did, and as you processed out, took your records to DAV went through them, and they filed for you, or they assisted you. And they really are a great advocate. You know, there's a reason why the DAV has an office at the VA. It's because they're wired in, because they're a reliable source. But you know, you also mentioned that you had, besides the tinnitus, you also had some other things that were identified as 0%. I would encourage you and encourage anybody who has a 0% rating, go back to DAV and tell them you wanna appeal that. And if you don't, even if you don't appeal it now, in the future, you know, I went to 100% because I had a 0% that later started becoming more of a problem, and I had that reevaluated, and then that got added on. So don't dispel that. 0% doesn't mean nothing. 0% means maybe not today.
Right, and that's the important bit. If anything comes up with those things later, to your point, they'll get covered by the VA.
Exactly. Joe?
No, I mean, you guys just summed that up perfectly, right? I was gonna bring up the exact same point. You know, your ratings, like all of the things you identified, even if they are 0%, will later. I mean, unfortunately, like the sad story of this is we're all getting older and we continue to get more and more broken. And I think that happens to everyone. So, you know, you kind of, that's what old age is, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that is an important. I think that's a really an important point that you make there too. And again, because this is going to impact Jim later, and you know, a lot of things become issues later because they become cumulative. You know, one thing, you know, you got a back problem, and 10 years later you have knee problems because of your back problem, and you know, and whatever, right? It all gets worse. I don't know about, you know, your lifestyle choices, but you know, that's a whole nother issue. So
Lots of yoga and lots of exercise. So
yeah, that's right.
doing well.
Gotta stretch. Don't hurt. Don't do things that overexert yourself. You know, don't blare music in your ears because you're already half deaf. All that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think we'd like to have you back too, Jim, if you would be.
Absolutely, man. Anytime. I'm happy to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, we appreciate you coming on. This was great catching up. We hadn't chatted in a while, so it's really, really good to catch up this way. And I mean, that's all I got. Anybody else?
No,
Be safe out there, guys.
I would just say that Veterans Voices with Joe and SteveO, you know, come back, keep coming and watching and learn some stuff. Get your card. Get your card at the park.
We love you guys. Take care.
All right, guys. Ciao. Thanks.